Women's Counter-Strike. Let's get this out of the way right now. There are no rules stopping women from playing in Counter-Strike events. The reason they don't is because they don't qualify. Simply, they aren't good enough. The not so simple is why that is. A big part of it could be because fewer women play the game, so it's to be expected that fewer of them ascend to pro tier. But then we have to ask the question, why do fewer women play the game in the first place? Is it nature? Is it nurture? Possibly a bit of both. Are guys wired to be more competitive, more aggressive? Does this translate to an advantage of some sort? I'm sure that everybody's got their own theories about this. Whatever the reasons might be, the burden will always be on the women in the scene to prove that they can keep up with their male counterparts. But the rest of us can do our bit by ensuring that we don't put up artificial barriers, or to make it about anything else other than their counter-striking ability. Because right now, there are barriers. You probably haven't seen them. I know I hadn't. Until I had. Now, I have to admit, my experience of being a woman in Counter-Strike is very limited. Personally, the most alarming moment for me, and when I discovered there was a problem, was back in 2015 when I was watching Vexy playing a match, and out of nowhere, other people on the server broke their match-long silence simply to post sexist things to her. Not to do with their counter-striking ability, nothing to do with anything about the game being played. Things were posted simply because she was a woman. And still is. And these comments were so stupid, so thoughtless, and served no purpose other than to belittle her, or to make her angry or upset. I couldn't believe that there were people who, upon encountering a woman in a match, would immediately jump to such mindless, sexist abuse for no apparent reason. I don't think Vexy was even paying attention to this, but when I spoke with her about it afterwards, she told me it was a fairly normal occurrence to receive that kind of treatment in the game. And I was horrified by this. A lot of people memeing about female CS are probably equally oblivious about this. Because being a guy, I don't receive this kind of abuse. I wasn't even aware that this was a thing because it had never crossed my mind to insult somebody in a match just because they were a woman. For all I knew, I could have played 1,000 matches with and against 1,000 people who would have abused me, had only I been a woman.
To the f***ing kitchen. She got the lowest ADR on the team and she's f***ing on top. She's fading so much. How can you get 17 kills? And
dude, I did that really cool clutch. Did you not remember the cool recap?
You're f***ing like an emo girl. You're a girl playing video games. Bro,
whoa.
That's a bit sexist, you know?
Come on, buddy.
No, I don't
Just
care.
trying to play CS.
So, sell your f***ing pussy somewhere. I don't care. Go to the kitchen, shut the f*** up, stop playing Counter-Strike.
And this kind of sexism frustrates me because there are so few repercussions for those who do it. And because I am so powerless to do anything about it myself. When it's posted on social media, I see other people trying to reassure the victims of this sort of abuse that the nasty comments just come from players who are bad or jealous, or that it's great that the women can laugh it off in such a positive way. Now, it's good that there are people out there who are trying to support them, but that just isn't good enough. That isn't going to do anything to address the problem, and sometimes it makes it even worse, especially when I see victim blaming going on. This is presumably done by people who are angry that it's going on, but are so powerless to do anything about it themselves that they just blame the victim, as this is an easy way of washing their hands of the situation. Sexist abuse shouldn't exist in the first place, and while I'm sure it's not the only reason, it is a very good reason for why women don't feel welcome in the scene. On the face of it, Counter-Strike is the ideal platform for gender equality. It isn't about physical strength, which removes one of the very real advantages that men do have over women in conventional sports. And it being online, you can exist as nothing more than a nickname, a profile picture, and a character model in-game. People don't know who you are, or whether you're male or female. Until, of course, you open your mouth to speak, which opens you up to all sorts of abuse. Valve have taken steps to try and improve things. Trust Factor tries to separate the worst players from the rest of us. Abusive players eventually get auto-muted, and it's easy to mass block interactions with other players on the server. After speaking with women about this, it's apparent that bad stuff still happens, particularly at lower ranks. A new trend is for people to ask for their OnlyFans page, stuff like that, with the intention being to objectify them. Bit like when they use the phrase, get back to the kitchen, as a universal response to whatever a woman is trying to say or do. It's demeaning. And I think there are two sides to this. Yes, the stuff they're saying is nasty and unwelcome. But also, you know the people posting this abuse don't care, probably don't even think about it. Yet ultimately, it inflicts great damage to the female scene. Now you can say that victims of this abuse should just ignore it. Maybe it'll go away. But they have to ignore it every time. And sometimes it does get the better of them. Kira told me about this one time on Rocket League, where simply because her name had girl in it, an opposing player started spamming generic, misogynistic lines at her, over and over again, and something about this encounter was enough for her to lose her cool. She told me she was tilted, and that she ended up saying some things back to that person that she now regrets. But it just happens sometimes, you know? And what's the phrase? Evil triumphs when good men do nothing. So if you see this happening in your match, do something about it. Speak up, call out their behaviour as inappropriate, and let the women in your game know that they have your support. It means a lot not to go it alone, especially when it's still going on. Yes, you can disable profile pictures. Yes, you can mute people, but at the end of the day, Counter-Strike is a team game, and if you shut yourself off from everybody on your team, then you're not going to play to the best of your ability. Lucy told me that she gets around this by not going into matches in anything less than a pre-made team, simply to avoid the risk of encountering nasty, toxic behaviour, which it might do, but requiring a 5-stack puts up yet another barrier for women trying to play the game. She told me that she doesn't feel anger, only hurt, and disappointment towards the people responsible. She knows it's the internet and that there are no repercussions for this sort of behaviour. Sure, she reports those people for verbal abuse, but it doesn't feel like it makes a great deal of difference. When making this video, I tried to look up past discussions about this on Reddit to get a better feel of how the community feels about this, but I just stumbled across posts making fun of the female scene, likening pro-women CS to low-rank play, another being upvoted for suggesting that they remove women-only events completely. And this just seems backwards to me, and I think could even be making the problem worse. Abby thinks that the female CS meme is taken literally by some players, who use it to justify their attacks on the female players that they meet. Even when in a ranked game with similarly ranked players, they look down on their female peers and set out to put them down, essentially gatekeeping the higher tiers of Counter-Strike from anybody other than other men. So if you ask me, the reason there aren't top female players in Counter-Strike comes down to a lot of reasons, which when combined can make a big difference. They do get more abuse. This will make them less likely to play or want to play, or will force them to play in a way where they can't perform optimally. And even if they do have the ability to become the best, would they even want to in a scene that dismisses and belittles them every step of the way? Where every misstep at every level is tended to a meme that's upvoted on every mainstream internet platform. And remember, all this is on top of all the challenges that men already face when trying to go and to remain pro. Female player models were added to the game recently, and this meant a lot to the women that I spoke with. For Kira, it was exciting to finally be able to play as a character which kind of resembled herself. It wasn't like she expected them to be added, though she did mention that she missed the character selection feature that was in earlier Counter-Strike games. For her, a lot of gaming's appeal is about being able to roleplay a character. Not necessarily one that's her, more like one that's her idealised version of her, without real-life restrictions and limits. It is gaming after all. And the inclusion of a woman character wasn't so much adding women for the sake of it, so much as it was about addressing an odd omission which had been overlooked for years. For a game to have such a range of character models, but for all of them to be for just one of the sexes. Imagine if there were only female characters to choose from. It would seem like such a glaring omission to not have at least one male model to choose from. You know, just because. Lucy told me the same. She was also really excited when women player models were added to the game, and pointed out the resistance that these things received when they were first rolled out. Battlefield 5's female agents were a prime example. Counter-Strike's were more warmly received. She says the first were still met with some edgy comments, but now that there's half a dozen of them or so, it's becoming accepted, and she sees people using both. So while some players might not have cared, these character models broke down one of those little barriers that many of us never even noticed existed. And it might have been a bigger barrier than I thought. Kira told me that she considers Battlefield 5 to be inferior to Battlefield 4 in many areas, yet she still enjoys 5 more, simply because it has such a cool character customization feature. She told me she would love for Counter-Strike to give you base guy and girl skins, so that you don't have to pay money to play as a woman in the first place. And then maybe the game could add customization on top of these in the form of cosmetics. Maybe even introduce hats. So how else could Counter-Strike encourage women to play it? Lucy thinks that Riot have done a great job with Valorant in the form of the Game Changers events, which is a series of top tournaments with large prize pools for female gamers, with the ultimate goal of these being to build a champions tour that better represents the diversity of their community. Indeed, she told me that a lot of women have already left Counter-Strike because there are more opportunities for them elsewhere. And this isn't just happening to the players. She tells me that women are mostly hired on as hosts or as interviewers, and says how disappointed she is when a major is announced with only male talent. This is an esport. People watch it. And we're alienating half our potential viewership by having so few women represented. It doesn't send a great message when all of the people on stage are men, as was the case with PGL recently, until they added Freya to the roster. So this is why I see the value to women-only tournaments, like the recently announced ESL Women's CSGO circuit, which was actually the reason for me making this video, as I scrolled down the responses to it and saw hundreds of bitter comments from people claiming that it's unfair. Why should women have a women-only league, one where they can earn more, while playing at a lower level than in an open tournament? Hopefully this video has given you some reasons for why it should exist. and why it's good for Counter-Strike if it wants to remain a dominant esport. In an ideal world, we wouldn't need women-only events, but rather than seeing them as being the problem, see them as a product of a problem that needs to be fixed. And in the absence of any better solutions, I suggest we go along with it. My idea was that we all pretend to be women, firstly, to dilute the abuse down, and secondly, to get a better understanding, firsthand, of how abusive an environment Counter-Strike can be. Finally, I found this post. She was shown beating her enemies. She was a woman, and she only had one hand. Indeed, she of all people has had to overcome many barriers to achieve what she has in this game. And after so many female CS memes, how do you think the community responded to this? The top comment? Gender is irrelevant.